Yogena chittasya padena vācāṃ malam sharirasya ca vaidyakena yopākarottam pravaram munīnām patanjalim pranjaliranatosmi ābāhu puruṣākāram shaṅkhacakrāsidhārinam sahasrashirasam shvetam pranamāmi patanjalim gurur brahma gurur vishnu gurur devo maheshwaraha guru sakshat parabrahma tasmai shri gurave namaha harihi om. So last time we started with a new subsection, which is Abhyasa and Vairāgya. If you start from the beginning, we are at Samadhipada. That's going on. In the first 4 sutras, we saw what is Chitta, what is Purusha, how they relate to each other, and how the system works in some sense. After that, the second subsection was about Chitta Vrittis, the 5-fold Chitta Vrittis, Pramana, Vipareya, Vikalpa, Nidra, Smriti, the 5. And then we started, for Chitta Vritti Nirodha, what are the means? And then we said Abhyasa and Vairāgya. And last time we saw this beautiful analogy of Chitta Nadi, the Chitta as a river with 2 streams. And then what does Abhyasa do on one of the streams? What does Vairāgya do on the other stream? Then we went in some greater depth about Abhyasa through the 2 sutras on Abhyasa. And now we are poised to start on what is Vairāgya. While we are about to start there, let us also just take a look back and conclude the Chitta Vritti. And he was not there last time, so let's also get some insights on that in that area.
So the topic of vrittis changes with smriti. Now, as I've been often telling you during the delineation of the sutra, that smriti is not just memory. It is not proper to render the word smriti, which is a technical term, as smriti, memory. Smriti is more pervasive concept. Memory is not so pervasive concept. So, in order to impress on you that we should not be using the word memory for smriti, let me tell you an example. If a person is brain dead and dead absolutely, what happens to memory? Do you say that person is dead but the memory is still on? Because the locus of psychological memory is not there. Memory is a very psychological, psychomental concept. Smriti is not so psychomental concept. It is much more pervasive. So memory dies with the person dying. Smriti doesn't die with the person dying. Smriti is, as I said, much more pervasive concept. Every one of us have some knowledge. You say, I have this knowledge. Somebody else has some other knowledge. I have some knowledge. You have some knowledge. What is knowledge? Most of the knowledge is our smriti. Most of the knowledge is our memory. Not whole of the knowledge is memory, but most of our knowledge is memory. That's why we say, I know. I know this. I know that. Suppose the memory card is removed from your embodiment, will you have condition to say, I know this, I know that? So we have a lot of confusion and there is a lot of ambiguity between so many concepts such as knowledge, perception, cognition, memory, imagination, so many mental acts, various mental acts. The memory is so vital behind what we know. So most of our knowledge is nothing but body of memories. So even the memory, the psychological, psychomental word or the concept in psychology needs to be reconsidered. We distinguish between knowledge and memory, which is not justifiable. Now, that means memory is so pervasive that it also engulfs the knowledge. The smriti is further pervasive. The other day, I made a passing reference that we have smritis even behind our body. Our metabolism, working of metabolism is a memory of the body, memory in the body. That is why something remains constant so that others can identify that this is Prashant, this is Srineet, this is John, this is Joseph. Something is not changing. However, the body is constantly in a process of becoming. If you understand cellular metabolism, cells are coming and going. Metabolism, catabolism, anabolism, these are the terms which you get from the science. And as I said the other day, on an average, about 80,000 cells are dying per minute. That means new cells are born. So there is generation of cells. We are generation of cells, several generations of cells, yet something is constant within us. Why? Because the cells are giving birth to new cells with a memory kind of impression. And that's why we do not radically change, which can take us beyond identification for any other person. The body has so many memories. The other day I gave you example, if you eat potato, banana, consume tea, coffee, ice cream, whatever you eat, it becomes you. That means there is an impression of what you are physically, and whatever you eat is converted to become you. You might eat mango, it will become you. You eat potato, it will become you. You eat beef, it will become you. You drink coffee, it will become you. You drink water, it will become you. That means all those varieties of things which are eaten, they go into the body and they become you, your body, your flesh. So, there is also creativity in the body memories. In our Adhyatmic science, we are in three aspects called Kaya, Vacha, Manasa. We are embodiment of several organs. Just as we have 100 trillions of cells in us, we have several organs within us. What are those organs? Body organs. Organs of body. Organs of body include your external organs which give us human form, like hands and legs and trunk and head, etc. We have anatomical organs, physiological organs. There are several organs within us. So these are all body organs: liver, stomach, colon, bleeds, spleen, pancreas, intestines, duodenum, heart, lungs. Several body organs are there. Several mind organs are there. Vachika indriyas. Manasik indriyas, manasendriyas. So there are several mental organs. Mind is not just one organ, mind is body of several organs. And vacha, speech. Speech has several organs. Speech is not just one organ, it is body of so many organs. So each one has an ocean depth we need to understand the ocean depth of kayika indriyas, vachika indriyas, manasik indriyas. The word organ is not a good word in English, which is not a proper word for what is making us. We have the word indriyas. Indriya, the word indriya comes from Indra and of Indra, that is Indriya. Indra is king of all gods. If you have some idea of pantheon, what you call as, today it is called as Hindu pantheon. In Hindu pantheon, Indra is the king of gods. And each of the indriyas, kayika, vachika, manasika, countless indriyas, you will not be able to number the amount of indriyas that we have in the embodiment. So they are all indriyas, they are all celestial. So celestial components come together and turn out a human component. Celestial components come together and turn out human components. That means superior components come together and turn out an inferior component, inferior embodiment. Now why is it? Because human, the Manava Yoni has two Purusharthas, Bhoga, Pavargartha. So if you want to have Bhoga, then we must be human beings. We must be inferior product of celestial components. But then human beings are also supposed to have endeavor towards what is called as spirituality, or spiritual samambonam, human spiritual samambonam. So for that there is a provision that we are given celestial components, godly components. So those components can give us the ultimate spiritual samambonam. So for that purpose we are composed of celestial aspects. It is because of the senses and organs that human beings have celestial constitution. Even the biological creatures have celestial components. That is why they have the senses, which English calls them senses, we call them indriyas. Certain subhuman species have exalted powers. We have audition, we have auditory organ, but there are some creatures who have better auditory organs than human beings. We have visual organs, but there are some creatures who have better, more powerful visual organs than human beings. There are certain species who have better eyes than human beings, better vision than human beings, better audition than human beings, better olfactory organ than human beings. It is the celestial component even in a mosquito, even in a bacteria. So each of these kaya, vacha, manasa, they have their smriti baggage. They have their smriti baggage. We don't refer to so much to body memory. Although we make a reference to it, we are not much clear about it. Body language is there, body memory is there. We say this is a body memory, physical memory, this is mind's memory, etc., etc. They are oceans. So there is smriti with reference to body, kaya. There is smriti with reference to manas, mind. There is smriti with reference to senses, indriyas, and the vacha. The vacha, vachika, smriti. So smriti is more metaphysical term than a physical term, or psychological, more meta-psychological term than psychological term. Memory is very psychological. Smriti is not so psychological. It is also meta-psychological. There is a quotation in Chandogya Upanishad, Ahara Shuddho Sattva Shuddhi. And Sattva Shuddho Dhruva Smriti. Dhruva Smriti. Dhruva Smriti is the ultimate Smriti which gives you emancipation. That is Dhruva Smriti. Dhruva Smriti means, Dhruva means immovable, steady, constant, dislodgeable. That Smriti gives emancipation. So the just earlier, previous step for salvation, emancipation is Smriti. Dhruva Smriti. So it's a metapsychological concept, not just psychological concept. So therefore we should not render the word as memory. Memory cannot be metapsychological memory. Now each one of us are born with certain potentials, inborn potentials. We call them samskars. They are smriti. You don't remember, I don't remember my last life. You and me don't remember our last life. We don't have memory of our previous life. You don't have memory, I don't have memory. However, we all have smriti of previous life, which is manifesting as samskars. That is why we are what we are. Why is there a difference between each one of us? There is something which creates a difference between each one of us. It is because of the samskars, which is a metapsychological term, and samskars are nothing but smriti of previous life, previous lives. How many of us remember something of the last life, previous life, and previous lives retrospectively? Nothing. No memory. However, we have samskars, we have impressions, and that can be identified, that can be understood, that can be also believed, that this person has such samskars. I have such samskars. These are nothing but, these are smriti. So smriti is a wider concept. This is what I am trying to tell you. I cannot be telling you much more in one session like thing. Because even my memory baggage, to open it out will take a long time. So I'll have to have several sessions with you, then perhaps something will be extracted out of it, something will be excavated. It's really enormous. So I want you to basically understand this is not memory just. It is memory also, but not just memory. Now the 5 vrittis have been mentioned, and then yoga says we have to restrain all these vrittis. Find out, how will you think, what can be the modus operandi to really restrain all these vrittis? And yoga is actually that. But we cannot conceive, we cannot even imagine. We will not even have a thought process on it, that these vrittis are to be restrained. But one of the mysterious poets have wonderfully explained this with an analogy, that now we can imagine that yes, it can be restrained. The vrittis, all the 5 vrittis are hovering around what? All the 5 vrittis, either klishta or aklishta, they are hovering around what? They are hovering around the subjective entity of pronoun I, the me. Pronoun I or the me. They are all hovering around it, or they are all sitting on it, like the birds sit on a tree or a branch, or the bird flies. All these countless vrittis, which are in 5 classes, they either sit like a bird sitting on a tree, they sit on our pronoun I, or they are hovering around the pronoun I. So the mystic poet says, suppose you have kept a piece of jaggery here, or a sweet, you have kept it. What happens after a while? You will get flies from all over, and they will sit on it. Or something, suppose you have a very foul matter lying here, dirty matter lying here, you get obnoxious smell and you invite so many bacteria, so many worms will come and sit on it. What is the means? Do you drive those bacteria? Do you drive away the worms? No, you remove the piece of sweet or piece of dirt from there. What happens? After a while there will be no obnoxious smell. There will be no invitation to flies. There will be no invitations to worms. So the means is to remove that piece of sweet, jaggery, or remove the foul matter from there. So we all think this restraining countless vrittis in 5 classes. How is it possible? Just remove the pronoun I from the site on which the vrittis are sitting. That's the support, that's the locus on which the vrittis will sit, or they will be hovering around it. If you remove it, they won't hover there. There will be no condition for them to hovering around it, nor embark upon it, sit on it. Aham vritti is to be restrained. That's why that's a philosophy. To be working on one subjective entity, to be sublimating the pronoun I, and then making it depart from your embodiment, from your mind, that's the philosophy. So just the I vritti, asmita vritti, the pronoun I vritti must not be at sight of your consciousness. If that is removed, if the substrate is removed, the vrittis won't hover around it. So that is the trick of restraining vrittis, and not think how to restrain so many vrittis: mental vritti, intellectual vritti, emotional vritti, psychological vritti, then body vrittis, and past vrittis, and future vrittis, and present vrittis, and material vrittis, and etc., etc. Countless. Rather than any restraint taking place, you will create turbulence in the brain to just have a thought process on restraint. If you don't have this question, your mind won't have a problem at all. If you put this question, I want to restrain my chitta vrittis, and what will I do? Countless vrittis will come in. Do you follow? What's that called? टोळ धाड त्याला काय म्हणतात इंग्लिशमध्ये? टोळ धाड, that word? Locust. The moment you think I want to restrain my vrittis, there will be locust attack on your mind. Don't have this proposition, you will have no problem. But have this question or have this proposition, I want to restrain my mind, there will be locust attack of vrittis. And that is why, that's a beautiful analogy with which it is described. You just do something with your pronoun I. Apply a repellent on pronoun I. Like we apply a mosquito repellent on the skin and the mosquitoes are kept at bay. You don't wield a machine gun and go on shooting all mosquitoes around. You just apply mosquito repellent and the mosquitoes go away. The pronoun I should be insulated. Now you can't dry pronoun I. If you say I'm going to dry pronoun I, you will perish. So there is no suggestion that you should perish. What should be done? There should be anointment on pronoun I, so the pronoun I is insulated to vrittis. Vrittis will find a repellent and vrittis won't hover around, will not sit on the mind, and vrittis are restrained. That's the trick of yoga. That's what yoga is. That's what yoga does. Yoga doesn't work on your mind. Yoga doesn't work on your mental aspects, mental facets. It works on your pronoun I. So the pronoun I gets a kind of repellent coat over it and the vrittis won't come close. They will go away. We need to work on our subjective entity, pronoun I. That's how yoga does, and it can then it is possible to restrain countless billions and billions and trillions of vrittis. You don't have to have a scheme for every single vritti. Don't think there is a scheme for pramana vritti, a scheme for viparya vritti, a scheme for vikalpa and nidra and smriti. And then it's a class. Each class has several vrittis, thousands and millions of vrittis behind them. Don't have to do all the management. Like he said, remove the sweet from the sight. Keep it close somewhere. Flies will go away. Jaggery, remove it from the sight. Keep it in a container. Keep it close somewhere. Jaggeries will go. The mosquitoes, flies will go away. Our pronoun I is a problem for vrittis. Something needs to be done to subjective entity. Now, if you recall, klishta vrittis, aklishta vrittis have something to do with the metapsychical vrittis, and which comes in pramana vritti. There is yogika pratyaksha. If you recall, when we were dealing, he spoke about yogaja pratyaksha. Ours is laukika pratyaksha. Laukika pratyaksha is aklishta vritti. So there is laukika pramana, alaukika pramana. Viparya similarly, if you recall, during Viparya topic, he spoke about avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, vinivesha, which are metapsychological vrittis. So Viparya has metapsychological aspects, Vikalpa has metapsychological aspects, Smriti, Nidra has metapsychological aspects, which will come later towards the mid part of the second chapter. Swapna Nidra Jnana Alambanam Va. Swapna Jnanam, Nidra Jnanam. What is Swapna Jnanam? What is Nidra Jnanam? And Smriti, metapsychological. Smriti is huge body of all our previous lives. We are containing an archive of all our previous manifestations, incarnations, countless, from time without beginning. It's not just we have a past life within us. All the past lives. There is a microchip which contains all impressions of all our previous manifestations in all various 8.4 million yonis. So, Sauranshi lakh yoni, 8.4 million life classes. You have memory of our ant. Can you identify ant memory within you now? How it is possible that we can become ant in next life? We can transmigrate to ant next life? Because we already contain a memory of ant. This will come in the 4th chapter. Tatastat vipakan agunanam eva abhivaktir vasananam. 4th chapter. So at the point of death, what during the lifetime we did not have memory, we will have a memory at the last point of at the last breath, and we will be impelled and propelled into that yoni. If I have to become dog next life by karma, I don't remember dog during the lifetime in me. At the point of death, with the last breath, the Shwana Smriti will be triggered, and that's how I will go into the womb of a dog and take birth as dog. So we have elephant within us, insofar as Smriti is concerned. From elephant to a small bacteria, every Smriti is within us. There is not memory. Do you remember to have become a bacteria in some life? Elephant in some other life? No. Smriti is there. No memory, Smriti. Hope I have convinced you that if you just take one lesson, Smriti is not memory. That's a contentment to me. So, psychological, metapsychological aspects are there for Smriti, not for memory. Memory will be gone with your brain smashed, with your brain dead, you becoming dead. No memory, memory gone. Smriti doesn't go. So, that was what I wanted to just conclude about Smriti. And Smriti contains all the 5 memories, because it is based on all 5 memories. So smriti management is a big management. And even in subjectivistic I, pronoun I management, the memory is more important. What will you remember? What should you remember? To mitigate, shrink pronoun I. The religious consciousness says, Bhagavad Smriti. Remember God, you just don't remember God. Your Smriti about your pronoun I am man, I am young, I am old, I am occidental, I am oriental, I am this, I am that, all will go away. That's the magic of Bhagavad Smriti. And that's why recourse is taken to that Smriti, Bhagavad Smriti, Ishvara Pranidhan, Bhagavad Smriti, etc., etc. So that it will work on pronoun I in a way which is again a means is Smriti. Ishvara Pranidhana Dva. What is it? It is again memory act. Smriti, rather Smriti act. Nama Smaranam. Bhagavad Smaranam. You all say, most of you say you have not seen God. How can you remember God if you have not seen? You need, if you have memory only if you have seen something, heard something, experienced something. How many of you claim that you have seen God? Yet there is a mention of remembering God in all religions. On one hand you say, I have never seen God, I want to see God. I have never experienced God, I want to experience God. And we make our spiritual endeavor. On the other hand, they say, think of God, that is, remember God. So even other religions had this clue but did not investigate into it. How can you remember God whom you have not seen or whom you claim you have never seen so far? So Nama Smarana will work like insulating the pronoun I, so that the vrittis won't embark upon the mind. So that's how religious consciousness stays. So even Patanjali goes to Abhyasa vairāgyabhyam tannirodha. What is our Abhyasa? Your notion of Abhyasa: put on shorts and t-shirts, get a sticky mat, take a belt and bolster blanket and do something. Tatra sthitau yatnaha abhyasaha. Effort to be steady the mind, be calm the mind. You can't put arrestals to mind and say the mind is arrested and mind is quiet. So what is that abhyasa which will be calm the mind, be steady the mind? So that is the smriti aspect, not the memory aspect. The smriti is so important to classical essential yoga. So yoga is a process where you try to hypnotize your senses, hypnotize the mind, etc. And on the other hand, the pronoun I will be also treated like a repellent coat on it. So the vrittis will find a repellent, and that's how there are two means. One is abhyasa, the other one is vairāgyam. Something should be done to those worms which are coming here on the sweet jaggery. The other one is to do something to the jaggery itself. Is that right? Move the piece of sweet or move the foul matter, one, and the other one is also do something for that. So keep your surroundings clean, hygienically clean, so that they will not be around. If they are not around, then the piece of jaggery also will not be touched. So abhyasa vairāgyabhyam tannirodha. The abhyasa does something to subjectivistic entity and also those things which are around it, such as objects, such as tendencies, such as propensities. And vairāgya is also something which will again work for both subjectivistic entity as well as the vasanas, the tendencies, the propensities, the objects. And that's why the two means are mentioned there, where again the smriti aspect is so important, not memory. That's why sometimes you will have to investigate into what is this smriti, which constitutes abhyasa column and which constitutes the vairāgya column. Two together are going to effect a restraint. So that's a philosophical inquiry, where there will be a lot of pedantics, lot of hair-splitting argumentations, so many precepts will be there, so many notions, concepts have to be introduced. For us to understand easily, one of the mystic saints, I said, puts it very simply. For us to understand, not that we will get it. For us to understand what is restraint, how to restrain the chitta vrittis. So he just gives an analogy. It doesn't mean that you are given a trick to restrain your mind, but to understand. We first have to understand what is the restraint of mind. Is it ever possible? So that's why that is explained by the mystic saints. So if you want to be good students of yoga, don't just look into the text from Hatha Yoga Pradipika, Shiva Samhita, Gairan Samhita, Yoga Sutras, Vyasa Bhashya, Vachaspati, and Vijnana, Bhikshu, and Bhoj, and so many, countless. You need to have Sat Sangha, Gospels of wise people. They explain it far better. For us to understand, for getting it, then there is Sadhana Sangha, Shastra Sangha. So Sat Sangha, Shastra Sangha, Sadhana Sangha, these are the foundational aspects of spiritual practices. So it also suggests that sometimes you have to look into Gnaneshwari, sometimes look into Gatha, sometimes look into Eknathi Bhagavad. The 11th skand of Eknathi Bhagavad deals with Ashtanga Yoga in Bhakti. What is Ashtanga Yoga of Bhakti? How there is Yamani Yamasan Pranayam Pratyahara Dharana Dhyan Samadhi in Bhakti Yoga. This is the subject matter of the 11th skand of Bhagavad, on which Eknath Maharaj wrote a piece of literature, Eknathi Bhagavad, which is only commented on one chapter of Bhagavad, Mahabhagavate, Mahapuran, Srimad Bhagavat, 11th chapter. So as students of yoga, at some point in time, you will have to have a gravitational movement towards understanding, comprehending the saintly literature. Otherwise, most of the yoga will not be comprehended. So, abhyasa. Tatra sito yatnaha abhyasaha. Then what is the scheme of abhyasa? Has to be identified from the treatise of Patanjali. What is vairāgyam? Has to be conceived again from treatise of Patanjali. So what are the means of restraint? Are the two. And this abhyasa, how? Satudirha kala nairantarya satkara sevitaha drudha bhumihi. The abhyasa must be carried out for a long time. See, very long time is a very relative term. What is long for me may be short for you. What is short for me may be long for you. Is that right? What is long for me might be very long for someone. Suppose I continue this session for 3 hours. It may not be long for me, but it will be very long for you. Is that right? So it's a relative term. So what is implied is long time means several lives. Not 2, 3, 4 hours and 30, 40, 50, 70 years and say, I am practicing 50 years and I am most senior, most amongst all of you. No, that's not the chronological aspect. That so many weeks and so many months, and today you want to learn in 3 weeks and 6 months and 3 years course and 5 years course. A very extensive course, exhaustive course. I had course of 10 years. It is several lives. Whether it is long or not has to be decided by the distance you traverse. Suppose I say from here to go to Deccan Yagana I took 4 hours, it was a very long time. But if I say from here I went to New York in 4 hours, what would you say? What would you say? Long time? So, what is the destination? That must be considered. Then you will say whether it is long time or very short time. Suppose I say I go around the world, the whole globe, in 20 minutes. You say, oh, so fast, 24,000 miles. And 20 minutes, I go one orbit. You say very fast. If I say 2 minutes, so oh, what is this? I reach the moon in 3 days. Oh, so fast. It depends upon what distance you are traversing. What is the distance that we are going to traverse? Is they are going to emancipation. How far is emancipation? What is the expanse of the universe? What is emancipation? Emancipation is to go beyond the universe. To go beyond the universe. What is the spread of universe? Is it 15 billion light years? Spread of universe. So it is something like 15 billion light years. That means to go beyond the universe, it will take 15 billion years at the velocity of light. Now suppose you require 10,000 lives to reach emancipation. What is 10,000 lives? 10,000 into, let us say, 100 years each life. Is it too much? In a million years, if you are going to get emancipated, where you are going to go beyond the universe, beyond the cosmos, where there are no gravities, is it too long? Somebody, if I say, you get emancipated by in 1 million years, you will say, oh, too long. What is the distance you are traversing? You are going past those 15 billion years spread of universe. So, long time is not really long if you have proper perspective. But for us, he had to say, because then he could not have said very short time, then we would not have understood. So, satudirha kala nairantarya satkara sevito dudubimi. So he explained you that last time. So I hand over to him to go further beyond. Thank you for your patience.
So, when Vyasa or Patanjali introduced Abhyasa Vairagya as the means for Chitta Vritti Nirodha, Vyasa drew the analogy of Chitta Nadi, where Chitta is like a river with 2 streams. One is facing the material world, the samsara, and the other is facing sort of moksha, kalyanaya. And then Vyasa explained that Abhyasa, it plays the role of strengthening that stream which is going towards liberation. And Vairagya plays the role, it said khili karoti. So it is weakening or drying up the other stream that is going towards the material world. So that is what Vairagya is about. So we looked at the 2 sutras about Abhyasa. The next 2 sutras are about Vairagya. Now Vairagya, the term is viragaha bhave vairāgyam. So the viraganess, right? That is vairāgyam. vigataha ragaha yasmat saha. So the attachment has gone away from this, and that is viragaha from him. And this aspect, this concept is vairāgyam. So non-attachment, complete non-attachment. Here it is a technical term which is defined by the first sutra. And actually there are sort of two fundamental levels of vairāgyam. The second one will come in the subsequent sutra, that is called para vairāgyam. And therefore the one being defined right now is called apara vairāgyam. Para is sort of the higher vairāgyam. So this is in that lower than the para vairāgyam, it's called apara vairāgyam. Now the sutra is dṛṣṭānuśravikaviṣayavitṛṣṇasya vaśīkārasajñā vairāgyam. So as usual, let us understand the words in the sutra, what it says. So dṛṣṭānuśravikaviṣayavitṛṣṇasya, that is one compound term. That says dṛṣṭāha anuśravikaha viṣayaha. So dṛṣṭāha viṣayaha means, so viṣayaha are indriyarthaha, the objects that the senses can see and perceive and so on. So here the term dṛṣṭāha is intended to refer to the laukika material entities, the things in the world that we can see and smell and touch and hear and so on. And Vyasa will elaborate on that a little bit more, and I'll come to that. Anuśravikaha viṣayaha are things that are heard from scriptures and Vedas, and here they are meant to refer to things that are not part of the world. It's things, the heavenly entities and miraculous powers and so on. So those are the anuśravika viṣayaha. dṛṣṭānuśravika viṣayeshu vitṛṣṇah. That is dṛṣṭānuśravika viṣayavitṛṣṇah. So vitṛṣṇah means without desire, without thirst, without attachment and so on. So without desire with respect to what? With respect to the worldly entities and the other worldly. So that of such a, so dṛṣṭānuśravika viṣayavitṛṣṇasya, without any desires in any of these realms, vaśīkārasajñā. Now that is another technical term which I will elaborate on, because there is quite some background. So I'll come to that. But the vaśīkārasajñā means that is a state, it is an avastha where there is control, right? So the control over the senses, control over the tendencies and so on. Vasha means control. So vaśīkṛtam, vaśīkartum shaktaha. He has the samarthya, he has the capability to have control on indriyas and senses and gauna padarthaha. So that is, and that state, that avastha is vaśīkārasajñā. And having that for the worldly and other worldly objects, having a vaśīkārasajñā state, that is called vairāgyam. That is what this sutra says. Here, in general it is renunciation and non-attachment and so on, but it is also of a specific nature that has been clearly outlined by Patanjali. Now Vyasa begins. He says, Triyonnam panam aishwaryam iti dṛṣṭa viṣayaha. So sensual pleasures, glory, food, drinks, the sort of thing that is sort of attractive to the senses in the material realm. And Svarga, Vaideya, Prakriti Layatvam. So Svarga is heaven, right? So the promise of heaven, right? And Vaideya and so on, those are such otherworldly blissful states. And we won't go into what exactly that means right now. But about those otherworldly concepts also, vitṛṣṇah, completely free of desire. Divya Vishaya Samprayoge Api. So Divya Vishayaha, so the divine or non-divine worldly, such objects, Samprayoge Api, even when there is contact with them, so when you actually attain them, right? So even when there is contact, Chittasya Vishaya Dosha Darshinaha. So even in that state of the Chitta, one who is perceiving the problems, the fault with that, right? So all or otherworldly are taking one away from the abhyasa. Let me check the. Okay. So Vishaya Dosha Darshinaha. So when all of this is happening, where highly exalted things and attainments, whether worldly or non-worldly, what is being perceived is the fault with them, because they are causing a problem in the direction of yoga. So Vishaya Dosha Darshinaha Prasankhyaana Balat. So Prasankhyanam is Prakarshena Samyak Khyatihi. Ya, Sa Prasankhyanam. So it is a very exalted, right understanding and knowledge that one has achieved, which is at par with Viveka Khyati. To the strength of that, Bala means strength, Prasankhyana Balat. By using that strength, one is seeing all the faults with all these seemingly highly attractive objects. Anabhogatmika Heyopadeya Shunya means without any thirst for bhoga, experience, or even tyaga. So there is no thirst either for experience or for renunciation. There is no dvesha, hatred, or attachment or a thirst for non-attachment. None of that is there. Heyopadeya shunya. That state of the chitta, vaśīkārasajñā, having complete control, that is vairāgyam. So whatever Patanjali has said in the sutra, that is being elaborated further in the commentary by Vyasa. So it is saying that there is no thirst, but there is a lot of strength from the abhyasa that has come, prasankhyaana bala. So there is a strength, there is a capability for attainment, whether material or otherworldly, divine. And there is an actual contact. You are able to attain them. Even when that happens, what is being perceived is the fault, because all these are problematic in the yogic path. And when that happens, the non-attachment that arises as a result, even in that state, that is called vaśīkārasajñā, vairāgyam. Now this vairāgya, vaśīkārasajñā avastha, that state of complete non-attachment, is a result of a certain progression. And that progression has also been defined in our texts. Okay. So I'll try to cover that in the remaining time. So there are, the vaśīkārasajñā is sort of the fourth avastha, the fourth state. And it goes with yatamāna-saññā, vyatireka-saññā, ekendriya-saññā, and vaśīkārasajñā. So vaśīkāra is the fourth. And these four stages of progression have been translated and described in books in general, in popular books and so on. But I think it is worthwhile going to the source text to understand these accurately as it has been said. So I'll do that right now. So there is the first is yatamāna-saññā, second is vyatireka-saññā, third is ekendriya-saññā, and the fourth, which is what Patanjali refers to as the apara vairāgya, that is the vaśīkārasajñā. So here I am looking at how Tattva Vaisharadi describes that. So let us understand it sort of as accurately as we can. So to begin with, there is a imagery. There is a sort of a imagery, analogy, and a picture being laid out. It says, Rāgādayaha khalu kashayaha. So think of attachment and all of these things, attachment, hatred, and all of these tendencies as kashaya. So kashaya is something like, let's say a potion that you can make at, it's like a soup or a potion with medicinal properties and this and that. So the rāgādayaha, all these attachments and so on, khalu kashayaha, chittavartinaha, so they are in the chitta, taihi indriyani yathasvam vishayeshu pravartyanta. So these are, let us just draw this picture of these are potions or things that are in the chitta, which are making the indriyas, the senses, go towards their objects, indriyartha, which is what we want to prevent, right? The indriyas are drawn towards things, worldly things that they are attracted to. So that is causing attachment. Or other worldly things that we have heard about, and that is also causing attachment. And here when it refers to indriyas, when you say sense organ, it doesn't mean eye and ear and so on. It is all the aspects in the embodiment system, starting from the eye to right till where it comes to the chitta, and the aspect of chitta that is dealing with the indriya, right? So this we had discussed in the previous sutra. So when we say indriya here, it is not just the physical eye, but if we were to continue on the physical analogy, it will be the eye, the nervous system, the part of the brain and so on. So it is the entire system up to the influence on the chitta that is encompassed in the word indriya. So now this ragadayaha, these are sort of these things in the chitta that are making the indriyas go towards the objects, their vishayas. Tanma pravartishata indriyani tad vishayeshu iti. So let these indriyas not go towards their objects, not go towards their vishayas. Tat paripachanaya arambha prayatnaha. So for that to happen, these portions or these things are being cooked. Okay, in some sense they are being cured and cooked. So there is this cooking kind of a process that is happening that will prevent these raga, these portions of attachment and so on, they are being cooked so that may my indriyas not go towards their objects. So this effort of cooking, the beginning of that effort, that is yatamana sanya. So that is the first stage of vairāgyam. Yatamana sanya vairāgyam, where the sadhaka, the seeker, has now initiated a process by which these portions of raga and so on that they are sort of making the indriyas go towards the vishayas. Let that not happen. The effort in that direction has begun, has been instated. That is yatamana sanya. And yatamana means effort is going on. Yata means effort, trying. Yatamana is the effort is in progress. That is the first stage. That is yatamana sanya of vairāgyam.
The yatamana also means niyatamana. See, it is not giving up all objects. Basically, vairāgya is not giving up worldliness, giving up worldly objects, giving up worldly pleasures. It is just thirstlessness. Don't be having thirst. Doesn't say that you must give up. So this is a basic concept about vairāgya. You think vairāgya means give up this, give up that, give up everything. It's not giving up. It is just managing the thirst. If there is enormous thirst, try to taper it. And then it becomes with yatamana, yatamana, temperance, moderation. It doesn't suggest you stop that. But see that object is slowly diluted for you, and then take it in diluted way, consume the object. Say for instance, somebody is tea mad, coffee mad. Tea mad people means they take very strong tea or strong coffee. So slowly start diluting it. Ultimately it will just become brown water. So the tea will be given up. Coffee will be given up. It's a gradual process. So that's why he said it's a initiating measures towards vairāgya. Nowhere it suggests stop it. Because if it stop it, then it becomes pressure cooker and sometimes it will burst out. That's why it should be started with yatamana, where it is temperance, moderation. Identify which is the most liked thing in you. Which is that for your obsession? Most liked. What is it that it is not so much liked, least liked? So you must start manage it from something which is least liked, rather than going to something, doing something on most liked objects. That can be, you can become rebellion, the tendencies will rebel and they will create a problem. So you have to slowly commence, try to identify what are your passions. Where you don't have, where is a nominal passion? Sometimes certain habits are just social habits. Because you are in that society, you develop that habit. Because you go to a party, then you indulge in drinks. It has become social etiquettes. Tea, coffee. We never had passion for tea, coffee from time immemorial or previous lives. There were no coffees 10,000 years ago, 1 million years ago, 10 years, million years ago when we lived. It came because of the society, social conditions. The coffee came up and then we started taking coffee. Tea came up in society and we started taking tea. Can you imagine the ancestors some 10 billion years ago, there was no coffee and tea? From where did it come? It is a social kind of thing. So we start developing habits because of what is around us. So this must be identified, which is a superfluous passion, which is a superfluous tendency, superfluous desire. It is because of social condition in which I belong to a society, and therefore I have passion for it. See, all of us started taking tea and coffee because our parents were taking tea and coffee. They started taking tea and coffee because their parents took tea and coffee. But there was a time when there were no parents, the parents did not take tea and coffee. How did it come up? Social conditions. So we have such desires. So desires must be investigated, classified, that this is a pseudo desire. I can be really doing away with it, and yet I will have no problem. So start from such things. Take small measures. Don't take mega steps. Take micro steps, smaller steps. Gradually commence. Yatamana. Go towards moderation. Don't go towards renunciation straight away. Don't renounce. Become moderate and temperate. So that is yatamana, moderation. Niyata. Niyatamana, yatamana. So we are not at all asked to take a very big step, which can be impossible also, or which can rebel later. We can take a step today, but tomorrow it will explode. Passion dynamics are such. You can restrain it for a while. It's like pressure cooker. For a while there will be no steam. After a while the steam will build up. After a while it will be finding an escape way. And that's why you get a whistle in pressure cooker. So 3 whistles or 4 whistles, we say off, switch off. So that's passion dynamics. Concept of it should be understood. So that's yatamana, sajñā, vairāgyam.
So again, back to the picture, the cooking has begun. Okay, the cooking and curing of these potions has started. That is yatamana sajñā. Now, tad ārambhe sati, once that has begun, kechit kashayaha pakvaha, some of those potions have been cooked and cured. Pakshante chakechit, some will be cured. It is still going on. Some are still in progress. Tatra pakshamanebhyaha pakvanam vyatirekena avadharanam vyatireka sajñā. So here,
just a minute. He spoke about cooking. What is cooking? How it is cooked? It is cooked by knowledge and wisdom. So see that the process of cooking is by jnana. I am not referring to knowledge, jnana. So jnana is the process to do something whereby the passions are processed so that they will not bother you later. See, what is taking raw food? Raw food and then cooked food. How will we digest raw food and how easily we digest cooked food? So we prefer to cook the food and then eat it rather than eating it raw. We don't eat cereals, but we eat rice. Rice is cereals, but cooked. So this cooking required for vairāgya is by jnana. By jnana. So some endeavor in the realm of jnana should be there, which will start process of cooking And that's how vairāgya will be managed.
So in the cooking, some of the portions have gotten cooked and they have been cured. Some of them will become cured, but the cooking is still in progress. Separating the two, right? The thing that have been cooked, keep it separate, right? And vyatirekena avadharanam. So keep it separate, protect it there. And the things that are still under cooking, don't mix the two, so that whatever has been cooked does not again get uncooked because of the mixture. So that separation is vyatireka-saññā. So vyatireka in Marathi and Hindi we say tyacha vyatirikta, without that, vina. So that is what the vyatireka, the term, refers to. So the isolation of what has already been cooked from whatever cooking is in progress, in that analogy, that stage, right? In the yatamana, the cooking has just started, everything cooking is in progress. Vyatireka, part of it has gotten cooked, things are under control, it's good. The rest is still in progress. The separation of that and not allowing the mixing needs conscious awareness and attention, which will also, the abhyasa angle also comes. And that is where this stage is called vyatireka-saññā. Okay? Then, indriya pravartana asamarthataya pakvanam ausukya matrena manasi vyavasthanam ekendriya saññā. So this is the third one, ekendriya. So this level of cooking, after vyatireka-saññā, the cooking is sort of done. So now the indriyas are, they don't have the ability to influence the chitta and cause desires and all of that, because the cooking is complete. So the indriya stage has been completed. Once that has happened, what remains? There is still some amount of eagerness which remains in the mind. Autsukya matrena. That stage where the indriyas have been conquered, but the mind, the thought has not disappeared from the mind. The thought keeps rising up every once in a while. But because the indriya and that aspect is cooked, it doesn't lead to any wrong action. It doesn't lead to a strong attachment or non-attachment coming. But at the same time, it has not gone away from the mind. Autsukya matrena manasi vyavasthanam. That stage is ekendriya saññā. And here ekendriya refers to the mind. The one last aspect, once all the indriyas have been taken care of, is the mind. That stage is ekendriya saññā. So cooking, some of them have been cooked, some have not. So their separation, and then the cooking is complete, but still the thought remains in the mind. This is the third stage. This is the ekendriya saññā.
Ekendriya is deep mind psyche's passion, desire. Peripherally we are reformed. Like when we are in a social, we are very decent. Peripherally we are very, very decent people. However, the decency is not on our deeper mind. We are still indecent. Is that right? So there are several layers of mind, and peripheral, superficial layers of the mind, outer layers of the mind are being managed, are being organized, are being set right, yet there is a passion bubble in a deep plane of mind. And that is ekendriya. That means we are moreover reformed, but yet there is one deep mind aspect, deep psyche aspect, which is still having a throb for objects. That's why it is ekendriya. So that also has to be conquered ultimately. It's not just becoming decent in mind. There is much reformation beyond decencies. Many times that's why I say decency is all semblance. If somebody is a very decent person, critically one can say that he is peripherally reformed, but deep psyche, there is still tumult, turmoil, and all dirt is still there in a deeper mind. So one should not be really going for decency in life. One needs to go for reformations in life. So decency and reformations are two things. Decency is a semblance. If you have power to restrain, and then we will be in social phase, having a social phase, and very decent. He's a very decent person. But in deep mind, that's not the case. Reformations will work on deeper mind, not cosmetics, cosmetic mind. Decency is of the cosmetic mind. So deeper mind has a passion, that is ekendriya.
And now the fourth, the vaśīkāra. Autsukya matrasya api nivrutti rupa sthiteshu api divya vishayeshu upeksha buddhi. So even this autsukyam, the last amount eagerness in the deeper mind, once that has also been renounced, once that also goes away, even in the presence of material or divine objects, complete indifference, upeksha buddhi, sangya trayat para. So this is superior to the other three. This is vaśīkārasajñā. Right? So this is the fourth stage. Now the question is, why did Patanjali not mention the first three stages, and why directly it goes to vaśīkārasajñā? So if you look at it, this vairāgya that Patanjali is talking about here is from the normal state of a seeker right up to the point of sampragnāta yoga. It is not going beyond. It is not going to asampragnāta yoga. Now for sampragnāta yoga to be possible, sampragnāta yoga means the chitta has some support, but that support is complete true knowledge, yathartha jnanam, with the prashanta vahita sthiti. So there is a continuous shape and form of chitta with yathartha jnanam of the dhyaya vastu, of the object. That is sampragnāta state. Now, to come to the sampragnāta yoga, vairāgya is required, because any other thing will bring it back. If vairāgya is not present, there is going to be some samskara or something that going to fructify and bring it back to the material world out of that state. Right? So the level of vairāgya required for this to be achieved is exactly the vaśīkārasajñā vairāgya. Anything less than that is not going to be effective. Anything more than that is not required for sampragnāta. So here we are going for the range from normal state to the sampragnāta state, and the vaśīkāra vairāgya is the one that is going to enable the sampragnāta state of yoga. Beyond that also one needs to go, which is the asampragnāta state and so on, but that is a different vairāgya, that is a para vairāgya, not covered under this sutra, that will come in the next sutra. And that is the reason why the yatamana, vyatireka, ekendriya, they don't qualify to sort of participate at the sutra level. Sutra is the essentials of the subject. They can come in the commentary, they can come in the gloss and so on. Because the aim is the twofold yoga, the sampragnāta, asampragnāta. And the one that is related to and qualifies to the sampragnāta yoga is the vaśīkārasajñā. So that is what is essential for the understanding of the yogic system. And that is why we could say that in the sutra, it is the vaśīkārasajñā that has been mentioned. That has not been missed. He didn't directly go to paravairagya. Why? Because asampragnāta yoga is a very valid and one of the ultimate states. So that needs to be covered, and vaśīkāra gives you that. The next one, paravairagya, will give you that. Anything before vaśīkāra, it doesn't give you any of this. It is in the path, but you will never touch yoga in any of the other three states. It is only vaśīkārasajñā that can reach to that point. And hence, then we understand why Patanjali directly talks about vaśīkārasajñā, and why we have to look elsewhere to understand yatamana, vyatireka, ekendriya, and so on.
Okay, we are going for concluding stage now. Abhyasa is not practice, as it is rendered in most of the translations. Abhyasa is effort to be steady the mind stuff. Not mind merely. Chitta. Effort to be steady. Chitta. Tatra sthitau. Sthiti for what? For chitta. And effort to be steady the chitta is abhyasa. Not be steady the mind. You can take some sedatives and mind can be steadied. So it should not be rendered as practice. That's how it is rendered, practice. Abhyasa is a jnana prakriya, it's a knowledge process. Abhyasa is a knowledge process, because just now you heard that knowledge is the means to counter vairāgyam. Not detest, dislike, hate. You hate something and you get away from it. Is that right? Or you have detest, you have dislike, you get away. So that's a klesha by itself. If you hate something, if you have detest for something, it's a klesha. It is going to give you problems later. So knowledge is the means, not abandoning the desires. Not thwarting the desires, not suppressing the desires, not arresting the desires, not binding the desires. So, abhyasa is a knowledge process, wisdom process. And that's why during the classes I make you understand these are wisdom processes. If the jnana comes, then that's a measure against vairāgya as well, and that's a measure against restraining the chitta as well. Now, just as we have a concept of irritable bowel syndrome. Why the word irritable? Irritable bowel syndrome. Chitta has irritable syndromes. That is why chitta is fluctuating. That is why the chitta has its business. It is because it has an irritable syndrome in it. So it needs to be countered. So asanas will work for, or even on the plane of corporeal body, they will try to go for giving or bestowing, it's an endowment, the placidity and quietude. The metabolism has to be quietened. Metabolism must have a soothe. Metabolism must have benevolence. Physiology must have benevolence. That's called biochemistry. What is the state of mind? It's biochemistry. It is turbulent biochemistry gives us turbulent mind. It's a passive biochemistry gives us placid mind, passive mind, sober mind, sedate mind. And that's why how asanas are part of abhyasa can be understood by this. If you look into the chapters of some of the chapters of book on yogasanas, they work on our physiology. They work on our glandular system. If the endocrine system is in disarray, can you ensure a quiet, serene mind, placid mind, problemless mind? So the mind is disturbed by endocrine system disturbed, endocrine system not in balance. The glandular system in imbalance will give you imbalanced mind. You can't have there's a glandular imbalance but the balanced mind, not possible. So it starts working on physiological plane, corporeal plane for you to get resources for abhyasa state of chitta. And that's why asana, pranayam, japa, dhyana, meditation, they all work on corporeal aspects to beyond, to overcome the irritable syndrome in the psyche and consciousness. So that's how the yogic scheme has considered from the corporeal gates to various gates beyond for the for this state of abhyasa. Abhyasa will again complement, because it is a wisdom process, will complement for vairāgya to be coming up, and both together will start working for restraint. So the abhyasa works for vairāgya, vairāgya works for abhyasa. There is a convection of abhyasa vairāgya. Do you understand what is convection? So abhyasa vairāgya it's a convection. They mutually contribute each other. So abhyasa gives higher rung to vairāgya. Vairāgya gives higher rung to abhyasa. That's how it will be escalating. There is a convection. They work for each other. They are not two separate things. That's why easily you have read in Light on Yoga. There are two wings of the birds. Will the bird fly with one wing fluttering? That both the wings have to be coordinated, synchronized and coordinated. Then the bird is able to fly. So these are two which work on each other, for each other. So they have components for each other. They are not two separate components. Abhyasa has vairāgya components, vairāgya has abhyas components. That's why they will enrich each other. There will be convection which will develop potential for restraint. Okay? So today we will stop here because of some commitment for me. So there will be no question answers. So incidentally, it happens to be first kind of a ceremony which takes place for Gita. That is at 11. So I'll have to go. Thank you very much.
So let's recite the slokas on Guruji. Vaijñānikah shikshakatve kalākāra āsaneshu yaha yogābhyāse ca tattvajñas tam vande sundaram gurum yoga vriksho lokesmin vardhito yasya preranaya yogacharyaya gurave sundaraya namo namaha. Thank you.